Hello, welcome to Big Picture Monday. Let's get started on this week. We are studying Genesis chapters 37 through 41. Now, hold your breath. I want to talk to all those perfectionists out there. Or I'm not a perfectionist, but I do like checking things off. And that's, I think, why I've been so drawn to the Come Follow Me program from the very beginning, is because I love being able to check off my scripture study and we're all on the same schedule. And I just love the organization in that, right? Well, if you didn't notice, last week we ended with chapter 33 in Genesis, and this week we're starting with chapter 37. So yes, we skipped chapters for the first time this year. So I know it's March, it's our first time skipping chapters. Some of you are going to want to read those 3 chapters that we skipped just so that you can stay up to date and read the entire thing. I'm going to tell you right now, if you want to, go for it. I will not stop you from doing that. More power to you. But I want to tell you right now, we are not going to read the entire Old Testament this year. We are not even going to come close to reading the entire Old Testament this year. In fact, if you want to look at it, and I can link to it in my stories, but in the first few pages of the Come Follow Me manual this year, the writers explain how there's no way we could read the entire Old Testament this year. That's too much. And they explained a little bit of their decisions on what chapters they kept in and which ones they left out. So you can go read that. It's mostly not wanting to repeat things and choosing stories or scriptures that are most uplifting and things that we can apply to our lives, that they felt led to do that. So you can go look at that. Just know that if you're wanting to I'll just read these 3 chapters so I stay up to date, it's going to get so much harder and harder, because even though it's March and it's our first time skipping, it's now going to become more and more common. I mean, these readings are long enough as they are, but we're going to get to the point where we are skipping entire books of scripture. I know that does not sound great to some of you, but there is so much to learn in the Old Testament that to do 52 weeks of it, we're just going to do the best that we can with these little chunks, okay? So just heads up on that. We are skipping chapters. Now, in my study guide, and I'll do little recaps here, I do tell you what we miss in the skipped chapters, just briefly, is there anything important that we missed? I'm not doing full summaries, but if there's anything you need to know. And there are a couple things you do need to know that happened in Genesis 34 through 36 that we're skipping over. First of all, Rachel. Remember, Rachel is Jacob's favorite wife, the one he agreed to work 7 years for and then had to work another 7 years for her instead. She had already had Joseph, and we learned that, but she had another boy named Benjamin. All right. But we also learn she then died in childbirth for Benjamin. So Rachel has passed away. We also learned that Isaac passes away. Remember, Isaac is Jacob's dad. So Jacob and Esau, who have now reconciled, bury their father Isaac. So that's where we're at. That's all you need to know of what you skipped. Just let the guilt wash away, and let's pick it up in Genesis 37, okay? This is the week we get to focus on Joseph. And if you have certain songs from a musical that start to come to your mind, you are not alone, because as I have created study guides and videos and posts for this week, that's what's been going through my mind as well. I love it. But of course, there are some things that happen in the scriptures that did not happen in the musical. So let's dive into it. In chapter 37, we learn that Joseph, who is the oldest son of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel, okay, who died in childbirth with her next son. We learn that Joseph is Jacob's favorite. And it might seem a little strange, but Jacob is very forward, I guess, about how much he loves Joseph more than anyone else. And he gives him a coat of many colors, a special gift. So Jacob's brothers aren't really a big fan of Joseph. Joseph's brothers are not really a big fan of Joseph. Now, to even add on to this, Joseph also is having some dreams where he interprets that it means that his brothers are all bowing down to him and worshiping him and giving him respect. And he tells this to his brothers. His brothers do not like this either. Just not good feelings going on between them, to the point where the rest of these brothers say, we've got to get rid of Joseph. We've got to kill him. And luckily they are able to come to a better decision instead of, hey, there's some Ishmaelites passing by. Why don't we sell him to the Ishmaelites? So they sell him. He goes away. We do know that once they make it to Egypt, he is sold to a person named Potiphar. And Potiphar is the head guard of the Pharaoh's guard. But then they go home and they tell their dad, they show their dad the bloody coat, and his father says, oh no, Joseph's been killed. His father is so sad because now he has lost his favorite son in addition to losing his wife. Okay, press pause on this story real quick. Let's talk about Genesis chapter 38. Genesis chapter 38 is very different. It's one of those weird stories, and I just want to be open. First of all, if you're reading scriptures as a family, you might want to skip chapter 38. I'm just going to throw that out there. You might not want to have these conversations depending on the age of your children. And I think that's okay. I think it's totally fine. We have to remember that the Bible is not like written for our day in the way that we're used to that the Book of Mormon is. We're used to in the Book of Mormon seeing through the lens of what we need to learn these beautiful stories of great people and evil people and people who turned good. And we like see all this black and white. The Bible was not like written for our day. In fact, there's many different reasons that different authors and different compilations were made of different books of scripture. And so there's not always noteworthy things to look up to in the Bible as we're looking through it. And to me, chapter 38 was a chapter I read through and I was like, didn't write any notes. You're not going to see any posts from me about chapter 38 this week, but I do want to cover it just so you at least know. Basically, Judah, who is one of the sons of Jacob, right? He actually has 3 kids at this point. I think sometimes when we're reading this, we're like, all 12 of the sons were all teenagers at the same time. No, absolutely not. Judah, at the time of this story, already had 3 kids of his own. And kids old enough that one of his sons got married to a person named Tamar. Okay, so he's married to Tamar. Now it says, once again, I don't read into this too much because who knows what this actually means. It says that this son was wicked and then God killed him because of it. Okay, don't know what that actually means, and I don't lose sleep because of it because it just is weird, and I move on. And so Judah says to his daughter-in-law Tamar, who's now a widow, okay, why don't you go to my second son? And there's some weird stuff happens there. And then he says, listen, and then the second son is also killed because of his wickedness. And then he says to Tamar, why don't you wait until my third son is old enough and then you can marry him instead. Well, the third son turns old enough and he does not bring him to Tamar. So he kind of stands Tamar up. And so Tamar decides to dress up as a harlot and disguises herself, and she goes in to Judah, and after their interaction, she gives birth to 2 twins. So this is her father-in-law. That's it. Okay, moving on. Chapter 39. Let's go back to the story of the musical, right? So we are now in Egypt with Joseph. Joseph is in the household of Potiphar. Potiphar seems to be a fairly well-off person who's the captain of the guard of the Pharaoh. And Joseph rises in the ranks super quickly. He clearly has some great qualities about him. Potiphar loves him. He becomes second in Potiphar's household and is just in charge of everything. The only problem is someone else really loves Joseph too, and that is Potiphar's wife. She keeps pursuing him. He keeps saying no. Eventually, she catches him to the point where she feels like she has proof from a vengeful place that Joseph did try to seduce her. And she takes that to her husband. Her husband is, of course, not happy about this and throws Joseph in prison. And this is the Pharaoh's prison. In chapter 40, then, we pick up the story in prison. Now, I just want to clarify, when Joseph was sold to the Ishmaelites and brought down to Egypt, he was 17 years old. Okay, just want to put some things in perspective. So remember that. When Joseph was first sold to the Ishmaelites, he was 17 years old. Okay, so he's in prison now. In chapter 40, we learn that he is now the star of the prison. He's rising the ranks of the prisoners, and the prison guards love him, and he even has responsibilities in prison. And he gets to the point where there are 2 men who are thrown into prison, the butler and the baker. And Joseph hears them talking about these dreams that they've had. And Joseph says, hey, I can interpret dreams. So they tell him their dreams. And Joseph says, oh, I know what that means. Butler, in 3 days, the Pharaoh's going to come get you and you're going to be restored back to your place. And by the way, when you're back in good standing, can you please mention me to the Pharaoh, because I should not be here. And he kind of tells the butler his life story. Like, I was sold into slavery. I was falsely accused. I've been here for a long time. Please talk to the Pharaoh. And the butler's like, absolutely. If I'm getting out of here, I will do anything you say. He turns to the baker and says, and your dream means in 3 days, you're going to be killed. And both of these come true. So Joseph is accurate in his dream interpretation. Unfortunately, the butler forgets. Butler forgets to talk to the Pharaoh about Joseph. And that's it. All right, final chapter, chapter 41. This is kind of like the happy resolution to this part. The Pharaoh has 2 dreams that he cannot get out of his head. The first one is of 7 fat cows, and then 7 skinny cows come and eat those fat cows. And the second dream is of 7 beautiful ears of corn, and then there's 7 withered ears of corn that come and eat the big pieces of corn. I would love to see what these dreams actually looked like in Pharaoh's brain, because they kind of sound weird. Anyways, Pharaoh's like, I have these dreams, I need to get them interpreted. And the butler goes, ding, wait a second. I know a guy. I should have told you about him earlier. Sorry, he's in prison. So Pharaoh brings Joseph out. Joseph interprets the dreams and he says, listen, this means that Egypt is going to have, and the lands all around it, is going to have 7 years of plenty and bountiful blessings. And then they're going to have 7 years of drought. And through some interactions, I assume there were more interactions than just this initial dream interpretation, the Pharaoh loves Joseph, just like literally anyone else who interacts with Joseph besides his brothers. And the Pharaoh makes Joseph the ruler of Egypt. The ruler of Egypt. The only person above Joseph is the Pharaoh himself. So Joseph is now way above even Potiphar that he worked for a while there. Joseph is in charge of Egypt and is in charge of figuring out how they're going to handle these 7 years of plenty and these 7 years of famine. And so it happens. We have the 7 years of plenty, and Joseph is the one out. He's the leader. He is the one gathering all of the extras and putting them into storehouses and making sure that everything's okay. And then we see the years of famine start to turn as well. So we're getting into the first couple years of the famine, and we see Joseph again take the leadership role, and he is selling this back to the Egyptians, who are very comfortable in their living situations. Like, Egypt is the place to be. Also, on a personal note, we learn that Joseph gets married to a woman named Asenath, and that they have 2 sons. First son, Manasseh, and second son, Ephraim. Okay, so we will talk about them more later, but just know that that happened. And then I also want to say that when Joseph was made the number 2 in Egypt, the ruler of Egypt, really, he was 30 years old. So he was 17 when he was sold into slavery. He was 30 years old when he was made the ruler of Egypt. That's a 13-year span. We don't know exactly how it was broken up in Potiphar's household and how long he was in prison, and how long he then was maybe out before he was promoted. But yeah, 13 years of waiting before this starts to come to fruition. Okay, that is it for this week. We will pick up the rest of the story, which finishes the musical as well next week. I don't know about you guys, but we watched Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, the musical with Donny Osmond, of course. We watched that all the time growing up. So I think I will be playing that soundtrack on repeat. I don't know where you can find a recording of it anymore, because I'm pretty sure it was on a videotape and we don't have those anymore. Okay, that's it for this week. I'm excited to dive into these stories and then to continue Joseph's story next week as well. I think my personal question is going to be focusing on Joseph, because the Lord we learn in the scriptures specifically, Joseph was so righteous that everyone around him was blessed. And I think that's why everyone loved him so much too. And so that's my question this week. Like, how can I become more righteous? And then my righteousness can bless my family. It can bless my community. It can bless the people that I'm around. That's what I'm going to focus on as we talk about Joseph this week. All right, have a great week this week. Thank you so much for all your comments on last week's video. Let's do it again. It just helps show all the social media platforms how useful you're finding these videos, sharing and liking and commenting, all that stuff. Have a great week. Happy studying.